Be'ezer Hashem, now we'll get into the sugya from Dalminim to see how different it was in Meshach the last 1500 years of Klal Yisrael and Golas, that they weren't able to be Mekayim the Dalminim the way you're supposed to, halachically, appropriately, of course, of what the circumstances in Golas brought us to. And let's jump into it right away. Straight to Shulchan Aruch Chaim, Simon Tov Reish Nun Ches. Mash Noyahagim b'mokum shen esrig motzi. That we're noyig in a place where esrig is not common, that everyone buys it together, shakol hakoil, that the whole kehila, the whole community buys the esrig b'shutfis. He says the reason is because everyone has das makna, and he goes into it. There's a shtit mechaber. Because the whole shaila, the place can discuss the whole shaila about how could you be yotze with esrig shel shutfis, the shaila of makna. There's no problem. Come to Ramah, Hagar, the goyve mois esrig lefi momai, and we're goyve the mois, the money for the esrig according to the word, according to how much a person has money. Usher has to pay more, and only has to pay less. Why? Because usually we're talking about the extreme amount of money is because the esrig is because of an extra hider, and that it's not the same thing. The usher pays more for hider mitzvah. A regular mitzvah, everyone pays the same. When it comes to hider mitzvah, the Ashirim pay more. And that's why they would have, just like we make, everyone chips in, the whole Kehillah chips in for us, Torah, for Besmedrish. The whole Kehillah usually has a Achrayas to chip in for a certain part of the Kehillah. So too, when it came to Dal Minim, it was something that was so expensive that the whole Kehillah had to chip in. And the Ashirim had to give more, and the Neim also had to give, but that didn't have to give as much as the Ashirim. And that just comes to show us how expensive it was. It's something that the whole kila has to chip in must have been a tremendous amount of money. And, in Tzvas, where the Mechaber lived, probably there was enough Esrogim, Dalminim, Tzitz Yisrael, we spoke about over there, there's the Daka Dalminim. But that's why the Mechaber writes, and that was taking most of the places, they needed to chip in. You look in the Sefer Kolbai, the Kolbai writes, brings out from the Bnei Shmuel that the reason why it was Nespashet, the meaning that everyone's Yotze with the Esrog of the Chaver is not a problem because they're not Makbid. Also speaks about the din of Hakna, and he says the Ravid's Eitzer for Hakna was that he bought an Esrog for himself, and then he would give everyone the Esrog al Tanas Lahachzer. So that was the Ravid, the Heilige Ravid was one Esrog for the whole community. And that's how it was Bein Shmuel. Then he brings down from Bein Peretz, I don't know who this Bein Peretz is, but he brings down from Bein Peretz that an Ashkaz, the minig is to be koina alila b'shem kol hakol, and then he brings down more b'koimis. But that was the minig, that was the normal minig that the whole kehila, the whole community chipped in for the tremendous amount of money to buy Dalad Minim. The Heilige Chofetz Chaim was with Dagdik Kalak Chamura, but he was a big ani. Tremendous ani all his years, and there were years that he was also a Bal Chayiv. And when it came to Hider Mitzvah, the Chofetz Chaim was not makbid in a place because he didn't have money in a place which it's going to be too much money, and that's why when it came to Esrig, he was very makbid to what he did was what he bought an Esrig b'shutfus. And all his years, most of his years, it says, Rav Yomov Shitib Esrig, Acharim Be'esrig. He would be Shatib other than Esrogim, and he would teach them how to be Makna. But that was his, when it came to the main mitzvah, yes, of course, it's better for everyone to have their own Dalaminim, but he couldn't afford it. So that's why he chipped in with others in order to buy Esrig. He's brought down from his son, and the Sefer Yedid Der Seichem brings this down, and so to other Mamakoyim that we're going to mention, is also from that Sefer Yedid Der Seichem. The Aruch HaShulchan writes the same thing, that halavai atzleinu halavai, there should be what the mishpacha should have a dal minim. He says, but that's not common that you should even find that a mishpacha should have dal minim. And that the kilos, that's how it was with the kilos chipped in for the esrog. Reb Moshe and Chelik says, he speaks about the dion about what do you do the first day with a cotton? Because if you're making the dal minim for a cotton, then it's not going to be yours the rest of Yontif. And he can't be makna back to you. If you want to be makna to someone else the first day, it's not going to be lechem once you give it a cotton. So he says, in Europe, they will make the shittas Ravon. The Ravon shitta is that you don't have to be koine the esrog for a cotton. You don't have to be makna the esrog. A cotton can be eaten dalminim for chinuch wise without being koine. And that's how they got around the problem of a cotton. But he says that's not lahalacha, that's not l'chatchila. He says in our generation, that was because in Dutch Rebnei Yaris, most of the people didn't even have an esrog for themselves. They buried broch on the kilos esrog. And they weren't Mekayim the mitzvah of Manuim, the Hal. So that's why they were making all that also. Where he says, but we should be Machmed of Rambam, Torah, Mechab, Magavrom, Riva, Chroinim, that of course the cotton has to own the Dalminim. He says that's why in America that Ashkosh Baruch Hu is Mashpia Bechaz Yeshav Bechosai, we should be Machmed of this. So he's Dr. Moshe, and this halacha. And that's how I wasn't hungry. We just spoke about Russia. That's how I wasn't hungry. Sefer Al Zakarim brings down from Yitzchak Tov Weiss that in Pressburg, so he goes in Pressburg from Slovakia. He says that Goyim didn't have Dalminim themselves. Only the Talmud Chachamim or the Rabbanim had Dalminim, but everyone else, there was four or five sets, and the Shamash, he says, the Shamash would go around the cities, houses, before davening, and everyone was there to do the mitzvahs. Over there, in Al Zakarim brings down also from the Harpiness, he brings down that the reason, brings down the Bachrim, we find all the Hasidim don't buy the Dalminim, is because they didn't have, in Satmar, the Satmar Rebbe said, that's the reason why they didn't have, the Bachrim today are embarrassed because they're not used to doing it. Why they're not used to doing it? It's up to Satmar Rebbe's Chayil Racham Goyil, HaGoyin HaKadosh, because in the head, no one had Dalminim. He said, I was the son of the Rebbe. Rebbe Shassan, so I had Dalminim. He brings out interesting over there that the Rebbe actually wasn't happy with the esrog his father gave him because it wasn't a nice esrog. He was a child. It was a young bacher, whatever it was. The Rebbe Shekin of it. So he had the esrog, and Hungary is a little better than other places. They were able to buy for the Rebbe Shekin. They had Dalminim, and other places they probably even weren't able to buy Dalminim for Rebbe Shekin. But the Satmar Rebbe wasn't happy about that. Because it wasn't nice. The Satmar Rebbe used to save money a whole year in order to buy a nice esrog. This is when he was younger. And that's how I was in Hungary, that's how I was in Slovakia, that's how I was all the places that they didn't have Dalminim. And that's why today the Nebuchadnezzar Bachrim don't take Dalminim, because that's how it got stuck, because the Satmar Rebbe gesagt. So that's in Hungary. Over there in Yitzchak Tov Weiss, the Gavit from Eda Achris from Yerushalayim, says that in Besmedrish over there in Pressburg, that they would sell the schus to hold the Dalminim by Hal. Because again, all these places, they weren't Mekayim the mitzvahs Hananuim Kalacha. That Nuim was supposed to be during Hal. That's the main place. Ikar mitzvah shlekim Rishon placement is Bahal, and no one did that. And so there was one person that could do that. Who's going to do that? Chazan maybe the Rav. No, who was going to do that? That was they sold the schus. When they sold the aliyahs, they sold the schus for the whole Dalminim. Rabbi Yaakov Lipschitz of Kovna, I think it was the Shamash of the Chachamim, writes in the Sefer Zichron Yaakov how it was in his biography, how it was in his times. He says right after the Yom Kippur, everyone started feeling the simcha like it is today of sukkahs. Sukkahs, they started building the sukkahs, and he says because in those days no one had a prita for the neshama, everyone was very poor. So the four minim, the Arab minim were very expensive, and he says that's why there was a bunch of chaburas that came together and to trip him for an esrog. And he says there were different shuls that actually set up a system that you have a first, we'll have a second. After this shul finishes, Dalminim son goes and Shamash runs over to the next shul, brings it to them, and that's how they davened. That's how they succeeded in using the Dalminim during Sukkot. And the first tshuva of the Marsham, the first tshuva of the Marsham is about this topic. The Marsham says, it's to the Adaris. He was later he was the Rav of Yerushalayim, but at that time he was the Rav of Amir, and what was the Adaris sent to sound that the Masham was a Hasidish. The first Shiloh was from a Little Shagodl and Amir, the Adaris. It was the Ravid of the Rav of Mir, and he said, what was the Shiloh? He said that there were so many Batam Droshim in Mir, and there weren't Dalminim, there weren't enough Dalminim for everyone. That's why they had to make a system, like we just said before in Kovna, that there was the shul daven, and they used the Dalminim, and then the next shul daven, they used the Dalminim, and that's how it went from shul to shul. That's how they worked things out. And he said, what's the problem? What's the shayla? That they had to work it out, that they had to daven before the nates. They had to do the hal before the nates. It's not like chatchila. So what is that? What does the Masham have to say about that? And it's very interesting. Similar to that, Ben Ashchai in Shavuot Shuvas Rav Ba'alam speaks about how they were makeled with different shittas in the Netzach Haman. Usually they were machmer. He says, but in the year Tofresh Chof Shnas Keser, that they started being makel in the Zman of Netzach Haman. Why? Because there were so many different people that Himinig over here in his city was that they woke up early. Everyone went to shul early, and I'm sorry. Everyone there was a oishid that had dalminim, whoever had dalminim, and the whole city would come to that person, and they would come very early in the morning before davening. And there were so many people. It was dachik, was geshtipt, and they needed to have a little more place, so they had to start earlier shaking the dalminim. They davened right away in the morning, so they had to start earlier. Now, and the people were shaking much earlier, and they started being makel on when there was man netzachama on the earliest man. That was because there was not enough talmidim. And then the Ben Ashchai in Torah Lishma speaks about that how when they used to come to the house in the morning to shake the lulav, it was in the sukkah. He says everyone used to push, the whole shtot used to push, and it was geshtupt, and there was pasha to people, the chasha to people, and the pasha to people didn't care so much about the chasha of people, and they would push them and this and that. They weren't covered, and people were complaining that it's not. Someone complained that it's not covered. The Ben Ashchai gesagt, no, that's not true. This is a schus for Klal Yisrael, that everyone is pushing and Jesus and with this is going to be a male social the chivav mitzvahs that they do, that they're doing the mitzvah of Dalminim will be a schus and a male social for Klal Yisrael then. So this is the history of Dalminim, of this is the only beginning of the history of Dalminim of that we're talking about. And we see from this how little they had in those times, and and we have to understand that we have to be grateful to Hashem, what he has done to us in our generation, how much He has given to us. We don't have to go in the morning and push by someone's sukkah to go dal minim. We don't have to set up the minyanim. This one after another. We don't have to do this stuff. We don't have to have the shamash going around from house to house to bring the dalamim to everyone. This is the way they were able to make kind of mitzvahs. Until then, Baruch Hashem, we have to be grateful for the chesed Hashem that we have now, and see that as a kirvus Hashem, a moedik kirvus Hashem. And I want to go on a little bit more with the esrogim. So now we spoke about all those that had esrogim. You see in the pinkis, in the booklets of the Kilo from Pozna, they wrote down in the year Shem Petes that there were many years there were many years that they didn't have esrogim, and they were able to start getting, and there was a whole zach and different takanas they made in Pozna. what to do with the esrog? And there was a city in Taiwan. I'm not sure why this was like that, but Yehudas, there's a sefer called Yehudas Chaban B'Doros Achronim. He says there was no esrog found there, and they never saw aravas. We find in the Pinkas HaKehila from Takanas Kroker, from the Shtut Kroker, from Ayeshia. A ganze moidige problem that was einish for those that didn't do their job in buying the esrog dalminum kiroi. There were two brothers, Isaac and Matisyahu, the son of Rav Gatzel, Esrogim. I think he was called Esrogim because he dealt with Esrogim. He was the one that was Munah of Esrogim. And these two Gaboim, these two sons were also Munah on the Esrogim. And it brings down that they were entrusted to bring the Kehillah from, the whole Kehillah was official. They had someone that was entrusted to take care of the Esrog and Dalmidim. And they were guaranteed us they're going to bring 62 Lalavim and 32 Esrogim. And they said that these guys came the Sukkot time, they only brought half of it, and most of them are disgusting Esrogim, and most of them are apostle, they came like a bracha, inside the Esrogim, and inside the Lovim, they're all dried out, and the Ratan, the Psulim, and they took them away from the job. This was their business, this was their parnasa, and they were marved them from the umnus, and they gave, and anyone that's going to be right over here, that anyone that's going to take them for Esroiger, means the name was an Esroiger, so that's going to help them get the Dalminim, is going to have to give a kanasa of 100 Meya Dumas. And they went on and on how much you have to keep away from these people. The Trumas Hadeshen, famous Truman Trumas Hadeshen, he has Ala Uvda Tmuya, a odd story that what happened to you next to your city, that there were a bunch of yeshuvim, different cities, the yeshuvim, like towns, that didn't have an esrog. But there was one esrog, was one esrog. So what did they do? They chopped up the esrog into different parts, and they sent the esrog for sukkahs. So like that, everyone should have an esrog. He said, and what's the shayla? Came sukkahs, and they all got a part of an esrog, and it dried up, because it's you cut an esrog, it dries up, and they all got less than a kebeh of an esrog, and they all made a bracha. Unbelievable. They made a bracha on that. Imagine shaking the lulav on a part of an esrog, and it wasn't even kebeh. The shayla is if they did write it or not. And we tried the Pel Yates, and the Tshuva speaks about a shayla that there was a bunch of cities that didn't have an esrog, and one with Chesed Hashem, one city got an esrog, and during Sukkot, the other city sent them, please send us your esrog. You already did at the beginning of the Yom Tov, now let us give us a chance. And they didn't give it to him, and the Paskin that is right. There's a Tshuva to explain why they were right. And this is what was going on. Again, there was no esrogim, there was no dalmi. It was very even the places where there was esrogim was very expensive, and like we said, Hashem is bringing us closer to Him, and He's hugging us, and He's kissing us, and He's saying, "Let's go do the mitzvahs b'simcha of Yom Tov." Bez Hashem, the next year, hope to speak about the dasim and lulavim and the mitzvah from Sukkah. Bez Hashem, may Hashem help us and grant us with a oispel and slichus and kapara and alle gute Sachen.